Welcome to Chronicles of the Past. We are going to be talking about our own late Fela Anikulapo Kuti. Imagine a man whose music made governments tremble, a man who used his saxophone and voice not just to entertain, but to fight for justice. This man was Fela Anikulapo Kuti, musician, activist, and African legend. Before we begin our journey through Fela's extraordinary life, let me paint a picture for you. Think of a crowded nightclub in Lagos, Nigeria, filled with the sounds of pulsing drums, blaring horns, and hypnotic guitar rhythms. On stage stands a man in colorful clothing, his body covered in sweat as he blows into his saxophone, creating sounds that seem to come from another world. The crowd moves as one, dancing and chanting along with his powerful messages of freedom and resistance. This was the magic of Fela Kuti, a man who didn't just create music but created a movement. Fela once said, "Music is the weapon of the future." And indeed, he turned his music into a powerful weapon against corruption, oppression, and injustice in Nigeria and across Africa. His story is one of courage, creativity, and unwavering commitment to speaking truth to power, even when it cost him dearly. In the pages that follow, we will explore the remarkable journey of this musical revolutionary, from his birth into a family of activists and his education abroad, to his creation of Afrobeat music and his fierce battles with the Nigerian government. We will see how Fela transformed from a promising young musician into the Black President, a cultural icon whose influence continues to resonate around the world long after his death. So let us begin our exploration of the life and legacy of Fela Anikulapo Kuti, the man who dared to use music as a force for change and whose story continues to inspire new generations of artists and activists fighting for a better world. Fela Anikulapo Kuti was born on October 15, 1938, in Abeokuta, a city in southwestern Nigeria. At that time, Nigeria was still under British colonial rule. His birth name was actually Olufela Olusegun Oludotun Ransome Kuti, but the world would come to know him simply as Fela. Fela was born into a family that was already well known and respected in Nigeria. His family was not ordinary. They were educated and active in fighting for Nigeria's independence and rights. His father, Reverend Israel Oludotun Ransome Kuti, was an Anglican minister and school principal. He was a strict but fair man who valued education highly. Fela's mother, Chief Funmilayo Ransome Kuti, was even more remarkable. She was not just a mother, but a powerful activist and feminist who fought for women's rights and against British colonial rule. She was one of the most important women in African politics of her time and the first Nigerian woman to drive a car. Growing up in such a home, Fela was surrounded by discussions about politics, justice, and Nigerian culture from a very young age. His parents' home often hosted meetings of activists and intellectuals who were working for Nigeria's independence from Britain. These early experiences planted the seeds of political awareness in young Fela's mind, seeds that would later grow into his powerful music and activism. Fela had two brothers, Beko and Olikoye, who both became medical doctors and were also involved in activism. His cousin was Wole Soyinka, who would later become the first African to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. This family environment helped shape Fela's thinking and gave him the courage to later stand up against powerful forces. As a child, Fela showed early signs of both musical talent and a rebellious spirit. His family home was filled with music. His father played the piano, and many children in the neighborhood would come to their house to sing in the choir that Reverend Ransome Kuti organized. Young Fela absorbed all of these musical influences. Life in Abeokuta during Fela's childhood was a mix of traditional Yoruba culture and British colonial influence. The Yoruba people, to which Fela's family belonged, have a rich cultural tradition, including vibrant music, dance, and spirituality. Even though his parents were Christians, Fela was exposed to traditional Yoruba spiritual practices and music, which would later heavily influence his own musical style. Abeokuta itself was a town with a rich history. Its name means under the rock in the Yoruba language, referring to the Olumo rock that dominates the landscape and once provided shelter for the people during warfare. The town had been an important center of resistance against slave traders in earlier times. This spirit of resistance was part of the town's identity and would become part of Fela's identity too. Fela's family lived in a large compound that was always busy with visitors, music, and political discussions. This lively environment helped shape Fela's outgoing personality and his comfort. As Fela grew older, his love for music and rhythm started to show more clearly. He would often tap on tables, use sticks to bang out beats, and sing along with the church choir. His home was full of both traditional Yoruba music and Christian hymns. His father played the piano, and the church organ was part of Fela's early musical experience. These sounds stayed with him all his life. But life at home wasn't all music and fun. Fela's father was very strict. He believed in waking up early, studying hard, and going to church regularly. He wanted his children to grow up disciplined and focused. Fela, however, was different from his siblings. While they loved to study, Fela preferred music, mischief, and thinking in his own way. He sometimes got into trouble for not following rules, but he never stopped asking questions. Fela started his education at Abeokuta Grammar School, a well-known school where his father was the principal. There he began to learn more about the world, reading books, writing essays, and understanding history. He was not the top of his class, but his teachers could see that he was smart in a different way. He could speak confidently, argue his points, and entertain others with his storytelling. Even in school, Fela was already showing signs of his future path. He would gather students during break times and perform small shows. He could make people laugh, think, and clap all at the same time. Music, art, and drama came naturally to him. At home, his mother continued to inspire him. She often took him along to political meetings and women's gatherings. There he saw how ordinary people could challenge powerful leaders. He saw the strength of women's voices and the courage of those who stood against injustice. These moments taught Fela to value freedom and bravery above all things. When he was about 17 years old, his family began thinking about his future. His parents wanted him to follow a serious career, maybe a doctor or lawyer, just like his brothers. They never imagined he would become a musician. But deep down, Fela knew what his heart wanted. So when the time came to travel abroad, his parents sent him to London, England. Their plan was for him to study medicine. But Fela had other ideas, and that's where the next chapter of his life began. In 1958, Fela Anikulapo Kuti left Nigeria for London, England. His parents believed he was going to become a medical doctor, just like his older brother. They were proud and excited. London was far, cold, and full of opportunity. It was also a place of freedom, where Fela would soon discover his true calling. But when Fela arrived in London, he made a bold decision. He enrolled in Trinity College of Music instead of medical school. He didn't tell his parents right away. He knew they would be disappointed, especially his father. But Fela had made up his mind. Music was his future. At Trinity College, Fela studied classical music. He learned how to play the trumpet and piano, and he also trained in music theory and composition. He practiced for hours and started to understand how to mix different sounds and styles. He was no longer just playing around with rhythm. He was now becoming a real musician. London in the 1960s was alive with music and culture. It was a time of jazz, soul, funk, and new ideas. Fela found himself drawn to the jazz clubs and underground music scenes. He listened to legends like Miles Davis, John Coltrane, and Charlie Parker. These artists changed the way he saw music. He realized that music was not just for entertainment. It could also be a way to speak, protest, and educate. Fela also began to meet African and Caribbean students who were studying in London. They talked about colonialism, racism, and African freedom. These ideas shaped Fela's mind. He saw how black people all over the world were struggling for respect and justice. The same things his mother fought for in Nigeria were happening in places like Jamaica, Ghana, and the United States. During his time in London, Fela formed his first band called Kula Lobitos. The band played a mix of highlife, a popular West African style, jazz, and soul music. Their sound was fresh and exciting. Fela became the lead trumpet player and singer, full of passion and power. He was starting to find his voice, not just musically, but politically too. Fela also got married in London to his first wife, Remilekun Taylor, a Nigerian woman he met there. They had 3 children together, including Fela Kuti, who would later follow in his father's footsteps as a musician and activist. But things were not always easy. Money was tight. Sometimes the band struggled to book shows, and Fela still had to face the reality of being a black African in a white man's country. He saw racism up close. He was stopped by police. He was ignored or mocked because of his skin. These experiences made him even more determined to use music as a tool for change. After completing his studies, Fela returned to Nigeria in the early 1960s. He brought back with him a deep love for jazz, a new understanding of African identity, and a strong desire to shake up the music scene. But Nigeria was not ready for what Fela had to offer. Not yet. That would change soon. When Fela returned to Nigeria in 1963, he was full of ideas, energy, and a new style of music. But things didn't go smoothly at first. Nigeria was changing fast. The country had just gained independence from Britain in 1960, and people were still trying to find their voice and identity. The music band from London, Kula Lobitos, and began performing in clubs and on the radio. The band played a mix of highlife, jazz, and soul. It was different, bold, and loud. Fela played the trumpet and sang, while the rest of the band backed him with heavy drums, saxophones, and funky rhythms. At this time, if you have not yet subscribed to our channel, kindly do so now so that whenever we post any video, you will get the update. Thank you. But Fela was not yet the star he would become. At this time, he was still searching for the right message, the right beat, and the right way to connect deeply with his people. His music was good, but it hadn't yet touched the spirit of the Nigerian masses. Then something happened that would change Fela's life forever. In 1969, Fela took his band on a tour of the United States. It was supposed to be a simple music tour, but it turned into a spiritual and political awakening. While in Los Angeles, he met a strong African-American woman named Sandra Smith, later Sandra Isidore. She was an activist and a member of the Black Panther Party, a group that fought for the rights of black Americans. Sandra introduced Fela to books by Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, and other black thinkers. She helped him understand how music could be used not just to entertain, but to fight injustice. Fela began to see clearly. He realized that African people everywhere were suffering because of colonization, bad leadership, and lack of self-pride. He also realized that his music could be more than just sound. It could be a weapon. From that moment, Fela changed everything. He started writing songs in Pidgin English, a street language that almost every Nigerian could understand. He wanted his message to reach the on the street. He stopped copying Western styles and began mixing African rhythms, Yoruba drums, jazz horns, and funk beats. The result was something completely new, something powerful, something he called Afrobeat. Afrobeat was not just music, it was a movement. The songs were long, with strong beats, sharp horns, deep bass lines, and bold lyrics. Fela sang about real issues: corruption, poverty, police brutality, bad government, and African pride. His stage shows were electric. He danced, he shouted, he preached. The people loved it. By the early 1970s, Fela had become a different man. Not just a musician, but a messenger. He had found his sound, his voice, and his mission. When Fela returned to Nigeria from his US trip in 1970, he was no longer just a musician. He was a man with a mission. He had seen how music could be used to challenge power and speak for the people. Now he was ready to do the same in his own country. Fela immediately began reshaping his band. Kula Lobitos was no longer the right name. He changed it to Africa 70 and later Egypt 80. The music changed too. It was deeper, heavier, and more rebellious. The drums hit harder, the horns were sharper. The lyrics became direct and political. This was the birth of Afrobeat, a mix of Yoruba rhythms, highlife, jazz, funk, and raw truth. Fela also changed his image. He started wearing African clothes, speaking Pidgin English, and growing his hair in a natural Afro style. He dropped his English name Ransom, which he said was a slave name, and took the name Anikulapo, meaning he who carries death in his pouch. To Fela, this meant he controlled his own destiny, not the government, not the police, not even death itself. In 1971, Fela opened a club in Lagos called the Africa Shrine. It was more than just a music venue. It became a center for culture, activism, and African pride. Every night, people came from all over to watch Fela perform. The shows could last for hours, with dancing, speeches, and music that lit up the whole area. Fela also created his own community called the Kalakuta Republic. It was more than just a house. It was a space for free thinking, art, and resistance. Kalakuta had its own rules, its own way of life. Musicians, dancers, family members, and even homeless people lived there. It had a recording studio, a clinic, and even a small radio station. Fela declared it independent from Nigeria. He said Kalakuta was its own nation, but not everyone was happy with what Fela was doing. His songs began attacking the Nigerian government directly. He called out corrupt leaders, greedy politicians, lazy soldiers, and crooked police officers. In songs like Zombie, he mocked the military, saying they only followed orders like robots. In Water No Get Enemy, he reminded people of how government tried to control even basic things like water and light. His music embarrassed those in power. Remember, we stopped on episode 1, at where we say that the more popular Fela became, the more the government saw him as a threat. But remember, we also say that Fela didn't stop. He said the truth must be told, no matter the cost. He said, music is the weapon. And for Fela, that weapon was now fully loaded. And that's where we'll leave it, for now. What you've seen is just the beginning. The real story is only starting to unfold. Questions remain unanswered, and the truth lies ahead. Don't miss part 2. It's coming soon, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Kindly subscribe to our channel, like and comment too, and also share it to your friends and family. God bless you.